All right, there we go. I think folks who wanted to get here are here, and welcome. My name is Jana Hexter, and I'm with the Northeast IPM Center based in Ithaca, New York. And it is 70 degrees, and I hear birdsong outside. It's quite wonderful. And I hope you also have similar wonderful weather where you are. So I am delighted to welcome you to our presentation today on exploring alternatives to neonicotinoid seed treatments and case studies in vegetable crops with Leo Segaldo. And if you could move to the next slide for me, that would be great. I want to acknowledge that we receive funding from USDA NIFR, the USDA National Institute for Food and Agriculture, Crop Protection and Pest Management Regional Coordination Program. And next slide, please. And this webinar will not end at 2 p.m. It will end at 3 p.m. And apologies for that typo. And the live transcription is available if you need that. You should just be able to select it in Zoom. We are recording this, and you will receive an email from me in about a week with a link to the recording and the slides. And it is also going to be posted up on our website. And it usually takes probably this time next week. It should be posted up on our website, and you should get an email from me. And if you really like this presentation and want somebody else to see it, have them just register, because everyone who registers it gets an email from us. So next slide, please. We love your questions. We have 48 people, and to make it easier for me to keep track of questions, I ask that you use the Q&A feature, which, if you're familiar, not the chat feature, but where it says Q&A with a question mark and a box. If you click on that, you can ask a question at any time, and you can ask questions anonymously. And it helps me because 3 people may have a similar question, and then I can mark them all as being answered. And next slide, please. I'm delighted to welcome Leo Segaldo. He is a recipient of the 2025 Northeastern IPM Center Outstanding Achievements in IPM Award. Congratulations, Leo.
Thank
Good
you.
job. All right. He's an entomologist whose research focuses on applied insect ecology and integrated pest management in vegetable crops. He's currently pursuing a PhD in entomology at Cornell University under Dr. Brian Nault. Leo's current research aims to enhance pest management strategies for onion maggots and seed corn maggots, focusing on their species composition, insecticide efficacy, susceptibility to active ingredients, and genetic structure across onion production regions. His research projects have enabled sugar cane growers in Louisiana and vegetable growers in New York and beyond to successfully implement solutions to their pest problems, maximizing yields. So thank you for doing that work. Sounds like it's helpful work, and I'm looking forward to this presentation. So, and next slide, please. We have a couple of questions for you before we begin, and it will be helpful for Leo for having a sense of who is on the call and what the primary area of interest is. So I will be quiet while you can answer the questions. You should see a poll pop up on your screen. If you don't worry about it, or if you're driving, don't worry about it. But if it's possible for you to answer, that would be great. All right. And I'm going to share the results. You should pop up on your screen. And you can see here, there's actually a real mix of people on the call, with people in vegetable crops being the largest number. And but we have people from field crops, fruits, ornamentals, vineyards. And what best describes your profession? Primarily, we have extension and researchers, and a few farmer growers, and some master gardeners. And other, 28% other. So I'm not quite sure what those folks fall into. How knowledgeable are people about alternatives to neonicotinoid seed treatments? And not at all, or somewhat, and only one person is extremely knowledgeable. And how do you think that you might be impacted by a possible ban and on seed treatments? And a lot of people see environmental impacts, less groundwater, but increases in price of production and cost of production. And do you think without neonicotinoids, insecticide use will increase in some vegetable crops? And the answer to that is 78% say yes. All right. So with that, I will turn it over to Leo, and he's going to do his presentation. We have a couple of breaks for questions. So if a question pops into your mind as you're watching this, pop it into the Q&A feature, and we'll ask it at the next break.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Jana, and thank you everyone for being here. It has been really a pleasure for me to be awarded this award from the Northeastern APM Center. And for my presentation today, as Jana was mentioning, I will just be presenting part of the research that we have been conducting over the last 3 years. Mostly, it will be focusing on vegetable crops and trying to find alternatives to neonicotinoid insecticide seed treatments. But before I start this presentation, I would like to thank so many people that have helped with this research. None of this would have been possible without the help of so many amazing people, such as members of the NOLAB, some of our university cooperators, our industry partners, some of our stakeholders, and last but certainly not least, some of the funding sources that have helped supported this research. So for my presentation, it will be divided in two main sections. First, I will just give a brief introduction about neonicotinoid insecticides and how they are used as seed treatments on vegetable crops. And then I will be presenting 3 case studies. As Jana mentioned, between the introduction to the neonicotinoid seed treatments and the first case study, we will have a short break for questions, and then I will finish with the other 2 case studies. So let's start talking about neonicotinoids. Neonicotinoids are a group of insecticides that have a chemical structure very similar to nicotine. That's why they're named neonicotinoid. And they have greater toxicity to insects than to mammals. In the past, people used to use insecticides such as organophosphates, organochlorines, that were very toxic to insects, but they were also very toxic to humans. So whenever we started using neonicotinoids, we started using insecticides that are, we could say, safer to humans. And with this, this become one of the insecticide classes that are very popular across the world. And the 2 main reasons why they are very popular is because they have systemic activity in the plants when applied to the soil, and they also have a broad spectrum of pest activity. And as you can see in this graph here, neonicotinoids are mostly used on a lot of crops. Like you can see, it is used on maize, soybean, cotton, vegetables. But if you look at closely at this graph, you can see like around 2004, there was an increase on the neonicotinoid use. And mostly this is attributed to what we like to call the neonicotinoid seed treatment revolution. And that meant that people started coating this type of insecticide on the seeds. And that's like increased their use by a lot. However, not everything is perfect with this class of insecticides. There have been some risks associated with their use. People talk about how they can be harmful to beneficial insects, such as pollinators. And with this in mind, a lot of people think that neonicotinoids should be banned in agricultural crops. And to answer this question, I will say that if neonicotinoids are going to be banned in agricultural crops, it is a yes and a no. Because in New York, the governor signed the Birds and the Bees Protection Act in 2023. And this bill will limit the use of neonicotinoid seed treatments on corn, soybeans, and wheat by 2029. Right now, the only vegetable that is included on this legislation is sweet corn. And this has to be done by 2029. However, on these crops that I mentioned, corn, soybean, and wheat, there are some exceptions that could apply. If a grower can justify that they have a need and they are on a risk scenario that they will have to apply neonicotinoids, they can receive a training and also like apply to a waiver process that will let them use neonicotinoids. And across the US, states like Vermont and Illinois are also seeking to ban neonicotinoids in agricultural production. And they are closely watching what New York is doing to see like how to implement this law. Also, to complicate the matters, in the vegetable world, large retail grocery stores have adopted policies to phase out pesticides that are harmful to bees on the produce that they will market. So that means that right now we have a lot of pressure to stop using this class of insecticides. So recognizing that need, we have decided to evaluate the performance of non-neonicotinoid insecticide treatments for protecting vegetable crops, and mostly from early season insect pests, because like, neonicotinoids are very effective at controlling these pests. But to do this research, I will say that we need help from a lot of people. And with that in mind, we have decided to form what we call like an alternative to neonicotinoid seed treatments in vegetable crops working group. And with this, we have done like a multi-state project, including people from California, Delaware, New York, Oregon, Washington, Wisconsin, and even from up north in Canada, in places such as Ontario. And I would like to thank all of the amazing people that have helped with this research and that have provided data. And I want to give a big shout out to my advisor, Brian Knoll, because he has been one of the pioneers in finding alternatives to neonicotinoid insecticides in the vegetable world. So let's talk about those alternatives. So for this presentation, I will be focusing on 3 case studies. I will be talking about insect pest control in sweet corn, beans, and in onions. So let's start with sweet corn. So for sweet corn, in the Northeast, it is produced over 72,000 acres. Depending on the year, that is like an average of what is going to be produced. 75% of that production will be for the fresh market, and 25% is for processing. As many other crops, sweet corns are affected by different insect pests. One of the most important early season pests is the seed corn maggot. As you can see in this picture here, the seed corn maggot will feed on the seed and potentially destroy the seed on heavy infestations. You can also see this picture here that like whenever the seed corn maggot feeds on that soft plant tissue, it could potentially destroy the plant. We also have another insect called the corn flea beetle, and the corn flea beetle affects sweet corn by transmitting a bacterial disease. And as you can see in this picture, this bacterial disease can produce some stunting and can also damage the quality of the ears. But since the introduction of neonicotinoid insecticides and other cultural practices, we haven't been seeing the corn flea beetle as much, and it hasn't been a problematic pest, at least in New York, for some time. So for my presentation, I will be mostly focusing on the seed corn maggot. So the seed corn maggot is a fly that has 3 to 5 generations per year. It will overwinter as a pupae in the soil, and it will mostly lay their eggs on decaying organic material and recently planted crops. As you can see in this picture here, they will feed on seeds. And on heavy infestations, they can destroy the plant completely. And like the more characteristic way to distinguish their damage is that we will see like a stem losses, like we will see like a decreased number of plants on heavy infestations. And as I was mentioning earlier, they can be very problematic, and like the risk period or the period whenever we like to call the sweet corn is more susceptible, will be early on the season, because this will align with the first generation of the sweet corn maggot flies, and whenever the sweet corn plants are also soft and easier for the maggots to feed on. So let's talk about how can we manage seed corn maggot on sweet corn or in any other vegetable crops. So overall, we would like to have something that we call integrated pest management. We will have different strategies that will complement and will help us to decrease the damage of this insect. So I will be talking about the integrated pest management strategies of sweet corn maggot in sweet corn. So right now, we don't really have any sweet corn variety that is resistant to the sweet corn maggot. The recommendation has been that we need to avoid fields that are recently treated with manure or with decaying organic matter. Also, we avoid planting into cold, wet soils or during fly peak activity. There are some predators and entomopathogenic fungi that could potentially kill this maggot, but they are not that widely adopted, and potentially more research will be needed to see how they could be used. And the only strategy that it has been very effective at controlling these maggots is to use an insecticide at planting. And because these maggots can be very problematic, there are no rescue treatments, because once the damage has occurred, there is nothing that we can do. So let's talk more about the potential strategy that works the best, and that is to use an insecticide at planting. So on sweet corn, there are two neonicotinoid insecticides that are used. We have Poncho and Cruiser. They will provide early season pest control. They are very effective during the first days. However, on this crop, we also have some other insecticides that are labeled. We have Fortensa and Lumivia, that both of them are Diamax, and look, we were interested to see if there were alternatives to Cruiser and Poncho, because both of these insecticides have been used for a really long time and they are very effective. So that's why we wanted to see if there is anything that compared to those two neonicotinoids. So for that, we decided to do some trials between 2022 and 2023. We included both the neonicotinoid insecticides. We also included the two other insecticides that are labeled in this crop, Fortensa and Lumivia. Both of them are non-neonicotinoids. As you can see in the pattern here, through my presentation, I will be marking the neonicotinoids with red font or with a red circle. And for this treatment, we were also interested in finding something that could be used for organic growers. So we have a Lumiver, and we also were interested in testing this new insecticide that is called plinazolin technology, that has another mode of action and that could be used in an insecticide resistance management plan. So for this experiment, it was conducted in Delaware, New York, Washington, and Wisconsin. I will be just mostly showing data from Washington. We didn't have any soil amendments, and we recorded stem counts 16 days after planting. So let's start with the results. So on the y-axis, I will have the mean number of plants per plot. So the higher the number, that means that that insecticide was more effective at controlling the seed corn maggot. On the x-axis, I will have the different insecticides, and I will be circling in red the neonicotinoid insecticide. So as you can see here, Cruiser was the insecticide that numerically had the higher number of healthy plants. However, Cruiser was not statistically different than any of the alternatives, like Lumiver, Fortensa, Lumivia, and both rays of this new insecticide were statistically similar to both of the neonicotinoids. And all of the insecticides were able to increase the number of healthy plants compared to not applying an insecticide. So as you can see, this is something very exciting for us. So right now, if neonicotinoids are completely out of sweet corn, and as you remember from the bill that was introduced in New York, they will be by 2029. Potentially growers, sweet corn growers can use Fortensa and Lumivia because both of them are already labeled on this crop to control for the sweet corn maggot. And they will have to, and we will have to pursue registration through IR4 of Lumiver and Plinazolin technology to be able to register these pesticides on these crops as well. So I think that this will be the first break.
Great, thank you. That's very interesting. So we have one question, which is, do you have any estimates on how common sweet corn maggot injury is on sweet corn?
That's a really good question. We don't really have any data for sweet corn. There are some people then on the main campus of Cornell that are doing research on field corn, and what they are mostly evaluating is to see what are like the risk factors that make like a field more susceptible to the seed corn maggot, but we don't really have an idea of how they are affecting sweet corn.
Right, thank you. And another question is, how do the costs compare for the alternative for TENS and Lumivia compared to the neonic seed treatments?
I don't really have an answer for that because like we don't really do too much on the economy, but I will say that that is something that we could do for the future. But what I will say is that the alternatives, both for TENS and Lumivia, they belong to a class of insecticides called diamides, and because that is a newer chemistry, I could expect it could be more expensive, but I'm not confident.
Okay. So there are two questions that are kind of related. One is, were the results from the other states similar to that from Washington? And then the other question is, why are we looking at Washington data with no amendments when the New York trials likely had manure or cover crops?
Yeah. And so the reason why we're showing like the data from Washington is because like we didn't find any significant differences in New York. And that's why like we are focusing like on that data set, just because like at least like everything there was higher number of healthy plants compared to the control. And what was the other question?
Why are we looking at the Washington data with no amendments when the New York trials had manure or cover crops?
Yeah, and yeah, I think that it is like the tricky thing is that yeah, like we didn't find significant statistical significant differences in the New York trial, and for me it was very interesting to see that Washington had significant differences.
Okay. All right. And a couple of people have asked about the slides, and they will be available with the presentation, with the recording. So for those folks who had questions or wanted to go back to a slide, you can be able to take a look at when the recording comes out. And somebody posted that the diamides are 3 times more expensive. So just for that information. And we have one more question, but I'm going to have us move ahead, and then we can come back to that question at the next break.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, and yeah, and thank you. Those were really good questions. Like, thank you so much for doing that. So let me see if I can move. Wait. Yeah, perfect. So now I will be showing you the two other case studies. So let's talk about beans. In the Northeast, the bean production is over 21,000 acres of beans, and the majority is produced in New York and Pennsylvania. Um, we have two major early season pests. We have the seed corn maggot and the potato leaf hopper. I have already talked a little bit about the seed corn maggot, but now I want to show you what they can do to the bean crop. So here on the right, we have an undamaged plants, and here on the left, we have the damaged plants. And what happens is that the seed corn maggot will feed on the corolito, and on heavy infestations, they can completely destroy the cotyledon. And also, they will feed on the first true leaves. And with that damage, they will leave the plant having like what we like to call like an snake head appearance. And potentially, that could have a negative impact on the bean plant. So as I have mentioned through this presentation, one of the key characteristics of seed corn maggot damage in vegetable crops is that they will cause stem losses. However, on beans, they can also delay plant maturity. Um, and so let's talk about how do we manage the seed corn maggot and beans. And I would say that it is very similar to the recommendations that we give to sweet corn growers. We don't really have any varieties that are resistant. We avoid fields that are treated with manure or decaying organic matter. And the most effective strategy will be to use an insecticide at planting. And that's why neonicotinoids have been very like widely used on this system. So on beans, the neonicotinoid that is used, it is called Cruiser. It is labeled both in driving and snapping. So we were interested in trying to see if we could find alternatives to Cruiser. So one thing that I need to mention is that Lumivia, it is a diamine that is labeled on driving but not on snapping. So that's why we were also interested in getting some data to see how Lumivia responds to seed corn maggot damage. We also wanted to evaluate Fortensa, there is another diamine. We wanted to evaluate Lumiver, that it could potentially be used for organic bean growers. And we also wanted to evaluate this new insecticide at two different rates. For this experiment, again, it was conducted in Delaware, New York, Washington, and Wisconsin from 2022 through 2024. Here, because we wanted to create a worst case scenario, we apply bone and meat meal. And the purpose of this is to attract flies so we can increase the pest pressure. And that way we can expose the insecticides to like the worst case scenario. And what we recorded was the number of stem counts 17 days after planting. So first, I will be showing you the results from the snapping trial and then the results from the driving trial. So again, just a reminder, on these graphs that I will be showing, we like to see graph bars that are higher, because like the higher the bar, that means that there is a higher number of healthy plants in that plot. And I will be circling in red the neonicotinoid insecticide. So here we can see that the neonicotinoid insecticide numerically was the one with the higher number of healthy plants, but Lumiver, Fortensa, and both rates of the new insecticide were statistically similar to the neonicotinoid insecticide. So that is definitely something to look forward. We can also see that all of the insecticides were able to increase the number of healthy plants compared to not applying an insecticide. So that is something that explains why using or chemical control is the only strategy to control these early season pests. But also, I just need you guys to be aware that these are on an enhanced pest pressure scenarios, right? Now, showing the results from driving, you can see here that, again, the neonicotinoid had a higher number of healthy plants, but Lumivia and both rates of the new insecticide had statistically similar numbers compared to the neonicotinoid insecticide. So it was interesting to me to see these results because both Lumiver and Fortensa that work really well on snapping didn't work as well in driving. And we don't really know why this happened, but potentially it could be that driving has a bigger seed, but yeah, we were just interested to see these results. So right now, if we can no longer use Cruiser on beans, this could be the alternative that could be used for seed corn maggot control, Lumiver, Fortensa, Lumivia, and Plinazolin technology. But as of today, only Lumivia is labeled and driving, and the others are not labeled. So we will have to pursue like a registration process with the manufacturer. So let's talk about another major early season pest on beans. Let's talk about the potato leaf hopper. So the potato leaf hopper is an insect that will have 1 to 2 generations per year. It will not overwinter in the Northeast, and it will mostly come from the southern US. And they cause damage on the bean plants by feeding. As you can see in this picture here, they will cause some leaf curling, some yellow and brown leaf margins. And this is what people call hopperborn. And this stunting can cause lower bean yields. To manage the potato leaf hopper in beans, we also try to do a holistic approach. However, there are no varieties that are resistant to these insect on beans. We avoid fields that are adjacent to alfalfa, and there are no biological control agents that can manage this insect. And the only strategy that we have is to use an insecticide at planting or doing foliar sprays following an action threshold. So the potato leaf hopper can be very problematic through plant emergence through bloom. And that's why like we need to manage for this insect pest. And to manage this insect, the recommendation it could be to use an insecticide seed treatment at planting. The most widely used is Cruiser. That is a neonicotinoid and is the only one that is labeled for this purpose on beans. And we can also do foliar sprays following an action threshold of 1 nymph per leaf. So we were interested to see if any of the alternatives that I have mentioned before, they could also provide some control for these insect pests. So to be able to address that question, we did this trial in New York in 2023 and 2024. We counted the nymphs on 20 trifoliate leaves, and then we compare the different treatments. So here, for the results, on the y-axis, I will have the number of nymphs per trifoliate, and on the x-axis, the different insecticides. This data was collected 52 days after planting. Here, we were not really expecting to have any insecticide left because like whenever we coat a seed with a pesticide, like it is very tiny amount. So it is like we don't expect to have sometimes like a whole like season long protection. But as you can see here, in the treatment that we didn't have an insecticide, it was above the action threshold. And that means that potentially like we will have to spray here to be able to decrease for potato leaf hopper damage. So I will show you the results. Not as exciting. Only the neonicotinoid insecticide was below the action threshold. Then all of the other alternatives had numbers that will justify applying like a foliar spray to control for the potato leaf hopper. But one of the things that really caught our attention is that neonicotinoids like Cruiser, they have systemic activity on the plants. diamides that are some alternatives to the neonicotinoids, they also have systemic activity in the plants. So both Fortens and Lumivia are systemic. So we were thinking, okay, we recorded this 52 days after planting. How many days of protection can each of these insecticides provide? So we decided to replicate this trial last year, and unfortunately, the pressure last year was not that good. As you can see here, it was even below threshold. However, we can see an interesting trend here. The neonicotinoid in red, even though there were no statistical differences here, had a lower number of potato leaf hopper nymphs compared to the other alternatives. So it is like, that is something very interesting, and we're planning on replicating this trial again this year to see what we can get. So as you can see, it is a complicated scenario. So right now, if we lose Cruiser on the bean crop, potentially we will have to use seed treatments to control for the seed corn maggots such as Lumiver, Fortenza, Lumivia, and Plinazolin. And right now, only Lumivia is labeled on dry bean, and none of these are labeled on snap bean. And we will have to supplement doing foliar sprays to manage for the potato leaf hopper. So that means that potentially we will increase our overall pesticide usage. So not something to look forward, right? Okay, so last case study. Let's talk about onions. So in the Northeast, onions are produced over 8,000 acres, and mostly over 3,000 farms. We will have 3,000 onion farms. But the majority of those onions are produced in New York, almost 97%, and they will be grown in what we call muck soils. So these are swamps that were completely drained, and then they have also like high organic matter content. And with that in mind, there are some early season pests that can be problematic. And again, those pests are the maggots. So one of the key early season pests on onions is the seed corn maggot. I have mentioned a lot of these insect species, but based on some research that we have been conducting, we have seen that depending on the geographical region of North America, we can see that there are differences on the number of maggot species. So we can see that there is also presence of other maggots feeding in onions, and one of the the biggest player will be the onion maggot. And these maggots can be very bad for onions. As you can see these pictures here, on heavy infestations, they can completely destroy the onion plant. Here you can see a comparison of an infested plant on a healthy plant, and you can see that the infested plant looks completely wilted. And these maggots are very aggressive because one single maggot can kill 10 plants. And if we left the crop unprotected, plant stems can be reduced by nearly 100%. I really like this picture because like here you can see a comparison. On the right, you have the use of an insecticide. On the left, having not an insecticide. And you can clearly see that the plant stems was decreased. And for this, the management is preventative because once the damage occurs, again, nothing can be done. So these maggots can be very problematic early in the season. As you can see in this graph here, in this diagram, the first generation of the seed corn maggot and the onion maggot will overlap with the period whenever the onion plants are emerging from the soil. And usually in that period, the onion plant is very soft. And that's why it is easier for the maggots to feed on that. So that's why our management strategies need to focus on the first generations of these maggots. So to manage these maggots, we have two neonicotinoids on the system. We have Sepresto and Cruiser. So we were interested in finding what else we can use to control these maggots that are non-neonicotinoids. There are some products that are already labeled, But in most of the cases, those products are combined with these neonicotinoids. So we wanted to see how can we manage these maggots, right? So these experiments were conducted in California, New York, Ontario, Oregon, and Washington. Today, I will only be showing data from California and New York. Here, we didn't have any soil amendments. This was a natural pest infestation from, like in the case of New York, from commercial onion farms. And we recorded the number of damaged plants and a final stem count early in July. So here, as you can see, we evaluated a lot of insecticides and on red, these are the insecticides that are neonics. And as you can see here, these are the combinations, right? Right now, the current standard is Traeger plus Cruiser and Lumiver plus Cruiser. Those will be like the most widely used insecticides. There are also some other people that use Presto, but as you can see, all of these combinations or these insecticides have a neonic. So I will show you the results. Here I'm marking with red the neonicotinoid, and I want to start by showing you the data from New York. On New York, this is very interesting because we have both maggot species. We have the onion maggot and the seed corn maggot. So that can give us like an overall response about how these seed treatments responds to mixed infestations. And for this graph bar that I will be showing you, the higher the number, that means that the higher the control they provide against these pests. Here we can see that most of the neonicotinoids perform better compared to the non-neonicotinoids. So the ones that are not in red, they are not neonicotinoids, and that is not something that excite us that much. You can see that the insecticides by themselves, so for example, like Lumiver, Traeger, didn't have, like they had a lower number of healthy plants. And the only non-neonicotinoid insecticide that had a higher number of healthy plants was plinazolin and Traeger. And this insecticide, plinazolin, it is not labeled on onions. So and we don't really know when it will become labeled. So that is something interesting too. So now, looking at the results from California, and the reason why I'm showing these results is because they only have, like where we did the trial, they mostly only have seed corn maggot. So this can give us some idea about how these seed treatments respond to seed corn maggot feeding. And if we look at the results, again, it is not that exciting because Traeger is not effective for the seed corn maggot. And the only non-neonicotinoid insecticide that work well for controlling for seed corn maggot is Lumiver. So you can clearly see that the insecticide seed treatment performance is depending on the predominant maggot species. So right now, if we were to lose both of our neonicotinoids in onions, potentially we could use Lumiver and Traeger. Both of them are labeled in onion, but typically they are not effective alone, as you saw from our previous data. And that is something that we will have to work to see if there is anything else that could kill those maggots, right? And just to give you something, some context, these are the recommendations that we have been giving to onion growers here in New York. And we have two scenarios, like a low maggot pressure scenario and a moderate to high maggot pressure. And you can see that all of the recommendations include at least one neonicotinoid insecticide. So right now, the scenario is not as good because like this system is mostly depending on neonicotinoid insecticides. That is something that we will have to do more research to see if there is anything else we can do. So just to wrap up this presentation, I just want to finish by saying that neonicotinoids continue to be highly effective for managing many vegetable insect pests. The alternatives are not always effective, as you can see by some of the examples in the case studies. Like they were effective in some, but not in others. And without neonicotinoids, insecticide use will increase in some crops, and control potentially could be more expensive. So thank you so much for paying attention and looking forward to your questions.
Great. So we have a few questions. How does soil moisture affect efficacy of seed treatments?
Yeah, no, so that's a really good question. It will be mostly depending on the active ingredient because some of them may be more water soluble than others. But what I will say is that it depends on the active ingredient, but it will definitely affect them.
Okay. Why didn't you use the bone meal amendment for sweet corn?
Well, so we did in our trial in New York. They didn't in Washington. And the reason why they didn't use it in Washington, I don't know, but it didn't work for us in New York, and I don't know why.
Okay. All right. How were the sweet corn maggots and or OM infestations confirmed, or were plant counts the only data recorded?
So so we mostly collect the number of damaged plants through the season, like once or twice per week. We will record the number of damaged plants, and then we will pull out all the maggots that are infesting those onions, and then we will identify them taxonomically. And we will also grab a subsample, and from that subsample, like we will confirm our taxonomical identifications by using molecular tools. So we are very confident from the maggots that we can collect. Like sometimes if there is early season damage, and if we cannot recover any maggots, we cannot really know if it was mostly seed corn maggot or running maggot, but from the ones that we can collect, at least we know what species they are.
Yep. All right. Do you have any estimates of how often sweet corn maggot injury occurs in beans?
Yeah, not really. And I would say that like we know for sure that it can be more problematic whenever people plant. I think that before July 1st, I think that that has been the recommendation. And depending if it is also like a cold and wet year. Also, if people have used manure, but we don't really have an estimate of how much damage they produce through the uh, northeastern region of the United States.
Okay. All right. And then the last is actually a comment, not a question. Plinazolan is not systemic, therefore it would not be expected to help with above ground pests like leafhoppers or aphids the way the neonics would. So
Yeah, no, and that is a good comment. Yeah, that's why for the next for the trial that we did in 2024, we only included the diamides and the neonics because those are the only ones that have the systemic activity.
great. All right, and that is perfect timing. So we have a couple of things left, and if one of which is a poll, which we'd love to get to. If you can move to the next screen, and the poll should appear. Yep, there it is. All right, so I'm going to share the results, and you can see that people feel more knowledgeable. 3 more people went into the extremely knowledgeable category. I think there was 1 to begin with. And how do you think you might be impacted by the possible ban? And I think those numbers have probably gone up. Be interesting to compare. And as a result, now do you think that without neonicotinoids, insecticide use will increase? And the answer to that is a resounding yes. And then how likely are you to use an alternative? And that's actually a good spread there. And how likely are you to increase your use of IPM? And that is definitely shifted as well. So thank you very much for taking the time to do that. And the I'm sorry, did I not share the results? I'm sorry. There we go. I will scroll through so that you can see them. And while I am doing that, I will tell you that there are 2 more toolboxes that are coming up. The GROW, bringing research and tools for integrated weed management to farmers, is coming next week, and that's on April 8th at 11 o'clock. And at the end of April, we have a presentation on pesticide label changes brought on by the Endangered Species Act. And that is going to be on April 29th. So there we go. If you would like to be in contact with people who are in your field around neonicotinoid seed treatments and or sweet corn and onions and beans, a good way is to use our Find a Colleague tool. So you can put a profile of yourself at that link, and you can find people like Leo. I don't know if you've added your profile yet, Leo, but
I will now.
yeah, there you go, who are interested in certain things. And it's a great way to find each other in the Northeast and beyond. I think people use it across the States. Next slide, please. A reminder, recording will be available in about a week, and I will send you a link to that. Next slide, please. That may be the end. There we go. I think that may be the end. So thank you very, very much for all your great questions and your attendance. And thanks, Leo, for a great presentation and interesting research. And congratulations on the award.
Thank you so much, Jenna, and thank you everyone for being here.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.